I didn't even take a gander at this chapter that I'm reading today, 8, so this should be interesting just to make sure we're facing the right way. Yep, there it is. Well, let's see how this goes on a Saturday afternoon. Book 1, Chapter 8. Eggert is still missing. Skunk is just waking up. Mr. Famous and Errol are still discussing the goings-on of the punk circuit, mixing political views with the most basic topics, gossip. And you are standing in the middle of the lawn juggling. Juggling is good exercise. It improves rhythmic skill, increases coordination, and it relaxes the mind so that it can think clearly. A few punks walk down the street and onto your driveway. It is Mickle Cork, Marianne McHenry, and Amber Talley. They have been friends of the band since the first incarnation a few years ago. They were neighborhood punks when there was no place for punks to go except into the fabled darker corners of the inner city. They hung out at the suburban mall where you still work, Ranter Shopping Mall. Sometimes when they had money, they would jump into Amber's Junkyard Caddy, or more recently, Skunk's Trans Am, and take a trip into the city to catch the Circle Jerks, or Insect Spray. That's of course, Black Flag. It's funny that I mixed a real band name with a fake band name. I think I was just having fun. Or any other popular band that could afford to play the larger venues. Now, partly because of Mr. Famous and your good friend Otto, Matt Nelson, they can practically walk to places where they can witness the newer punk bands beginning their journeys. They get to see band members as the flawed human beings they really are, face to face instead of as larger-than-life images on a stage. Actually, the face-to-face instead of as Actually, the images are smaller because of the distance between the audience and the performers. It is quite refreshing to have the three of them around. They knew you when the band was just a garage get-together at Franklin's parents' house. They are friends because of common surroundings and social preferences, stuck in the suburbs, dealing with and enjoying their youth. And they just happen to be punks. They live out the more overtly punk lifestyle, much more than you or Franklin. They have mohawks that change shape and color bi-weekly. Their clothes are ripped and safety pinned back together. Their jackets are covered in hand-drawn band logos. They wear combat boots and dark makeup. They have a few piercings, but not too many piercings. Not too many. Piercings have yet to become a necessary part of the ever-changing punk attire requirements. The modern primitives are just around the corner. But they do have severe problems with their parents that aren't really a requirement, but do seem to be hidden or proudly displayed wounds that punk helps to soothe. Or is it to nurture? Children are forced to endure some of the most fucked up situations an evil, decaying mind can imagine. Sometimes this horrible home life manifests in the choice to be a punk. You never quite got a handle on why or what it means to be a true punk. Definitions help to understand, but they can also distort the object they intend to clarify. It's hard to see beyond the limitations of crafted and popularized movements. I've always had a difficult time considering myself a punk. I think in many ways I'm more genuinely a punk than a lot of other people, but I don't know. I labels, it's actually very punk to not like labels, but that seems to be my cross I bear. Out of Mickle, Marianne, and Amber, only Mickle maintains a somewhat overtly punk life existence in the years to come. He's still working at, I'm pretty sure he's working at Medusa's in Lincoln Park. I don't want to give anybody's names away that weren't actually, you would know anyway because of bands, so I'm mostly keeping their names private. You can't imagine that the past disappears for them. Their perceptions alter and change, but they are still left with themselves and all they have ever been. It would be ridiculous to deny the effect of their memories on decisions they make on a daily basis for the rest of their lives. Many people say punk is just a rebellious stage in life. You soon grow out of it. This doesn't seem fair or appropriate to you. It's just another case of the externals taken too literally. The externals and superficialities cover and accentuate, but they do not directly specify the past or the future of an individual's yearnings or passages from home to home. Yeah, that's always a big theme of mine, of the outward, the clothes choices, and the psychological choices. In punk, I think there's like psychological and philosophical choices. There's clothes choices, and there's also music choices. Those are all different to me, and you can like one or the other, but you don't have to like all three. Mickle punches Skunk's foot and begins to twist it around until Skunk's arms reach up from the passenger seat and grab onto the dashboard. Your neighbors are peeking out of their windows, possibly a little frightened and simultaneously ready for action, fingers ready to dial for the police, baseball bat or BB gun at their sides, not vigilant enough to hurt someone, but definitely prepared to scare away any suspicious predators. I stuck BB gun in there. That's like a private joke to me because my neighbor Lou, who I can say his name because he's dead now, but Lou actually shot my cat Gimpy. We can never prove it, but you know, it had like BBs in its side, and he had a BB gun. Gimpy lived to be like 22 years old, but she had some pain in her side. Anyway, where was I? These neighbors can be pleasant, but are often pointlessly curious, which harbors misunderstandings and mistrust, driven by an overprotective communal consciousness. They cannot distinguish between violence and masculine affection, admittedly something you have trouble with too. They may also be slightly put off by the punk's choice of clothes and hairstyles. It's too reminiscent of the mass media's portrait of British youth wild in the streets, sending out their call for anarchy, nihilism, and violence. Or the roots may go even deeper into our sordid past, an inherited guilt and paranoia that twists the style into a manifestation of the hostility and vengeance of the conquered Mohawk-wearing Native Americans. Or maybe they just think your friends look silly and demented. The neighbors gave your older brother's friends and the same threatening and accusatory looks, and those teenagers were far angrier and more destructive than these sentimental maudlin misfits could ever be. Your brother's friends were the long-haired, pot-headed, jean jacket-wearing teenage misfits of the 70s. They had their costumes and their banners, too. Perhaps not as defined, but they definitely carried their wounds in open view, gaping, blistering, and infected. That's one of the things that me and Ben want to write about is my brothers. Love the guys, but they were definitely had a lot of shit going on. That's a lot of violence, that was carried over in the 70s. The anger your brothers carried around with them was too overpowering. There I say it. That anger split open lips with chaka sticks, bashed in front doors with large planters, blew up picture windows with M80s, pulled out each other's hair in clumps, and pounded holes in living room walls. You could not house such emotions. Its thickness would tear apart your easily inspired soul. In some ways, I wondered whether that's why I became more of a voyeur and like a writer, is because it was so violent that what I chose to do was to watch. I couldn't do much to help in those days. I felt kind of helpless. So anyway, Amber's not interested in seeing Skunk. She is walking toward you. As she approaches, behind her you can see Mickle, Marianne, and Skunk yanking and pulling at hair, sleeves, and boots, throwing cups of soda, chew, and ashes, and laughing and swearing at one another. Jack? That's your first name. Your neighbor is now standing on his porch, calling after you. Amber turns toward the neighbor's house. Marianne, Mickle, and Skunk stop their shenanigans and also turn to face him. It's fine, Lou. They're just having fun. How's your mother? What he really means is, where is your mother? When is she coming home? Does she have any idea you hang out with weirdos like this? I'm watching you. You come from a family that has a reputation for trouble and rebelliousness, a mother and 5 out-of-control kids with an uncut lawn filled to capacity with pieces of garbage, run-down mechanical devices, high school dropouts, and cats. Later in the future, while visiting the mall, sitting at the coffee shop you used to work at, pondering the good memories, remembering and waiting hopefully for the appearance of the long-ago customers and friends who gave you conversations to make the endless work-filled days enjoyable, you will have a short conversation with a neighborhood kid who went away to college only to come back home for 4 years later to work as a salesman selling discounted, overpriced shirts and pants. He will inform you that when he was younger, his mother always insisted he walk on the opposite side of the street when crossing by your house. That's true. You will think that that is a rather odd thing for a mother to tell a son, especially since it was your house, and you would not have been able to get home if you had to pass by on the other side of the street. Most of the suburban mothers of that neighborhood had, and still have, it so tediously easy that they need to magnify the lives of the families who are having a rough time, in order to keep themselves from clawing the walls of their kitchen or offing their loved ones. She's fine. She's still house-sitting. She won't be back for about a week. He didn't want to hear that information. He often forgets that you are not like your brothers, but they weren't so bad when they hung around. They had to deal with a shitload of anger and confusion. They never meant any real harm. They were sensitive boys reacting to a loss of purpose and subsequent abuse of drugs and the hazy culture of the 70s. Plus, having been in their early teens when the marriage of your mother and father exploded, could not have helped their feeling of misplacement. It is true that they had broken up walls and punched out each other. It was quite horrible for a while, but it had mostly subsided by now. They don't spend much time around the house anymore. You have an overwhelming sense of responsibility when it comes to your mother in this house. You wouldn't do anything that would put her trust of you in jeopardy. Why doesn't this nosy neighbor know this? One of the things I was going to write about in my book, and Ben was there for near the end, is that we lost the house. But that's a long story, and my dad moved back in as a patient, not as any kind of lover to my mom. All crazy stuff, but that's not in this book. Back to it. It may have something to do with his own day-to-day motivation, reflecting a shadow onto the purpose of everyone else's day-to-day motives. In the past, he had committed some actions that most would consider disturbing and vengeful. It was never proved, but always suspected, that he was the one who shot your favorite cat's left side full of BBs. Oh, I did write about it. Gimpy was that cat. It's a miracle the loving black cat survived. It is also suspected that he was the one who picked your sister's calico cat up by the tail and spun it around over his head before throwing it over a fence. That's true, too. That cat lived, too. That was Tigger. The cat came home with its tail twisted and bloody. The vet had to chop it off. Your mother only keeps outside cats. The idea of restricting a cat to the confines of a house nearly makes her cry. I think I've kind of was talked about, the subtext of talking about this is wild cats and just sort of wild kids and punks and how they go together and how they're both also my mother's very compassionate to animals and cats and how that probably bled over into me too. The idea of restricting a cat to the confines of a house nearly makes her cry. Lou had always been very protective of his own lawn. He has been retired from his job for as long as you can remember. He has a small garden that acts as a distraction against aging existential angst, but most of his concern and projection is focused on the prevention of foreign objects entering his backyard. Cats are easy targets. They are both seekers of evil and doorkeepers of beautiful oblivion. That's why he chose to wound instead of kill. The reason he looks upon you and your brothers and sisters and you and your brothers and sisters' friends as potential doers of devious acts is because if he was young again, that's exactly what he would be doing. But you don't know if one person in the whole lot would torture a cat, meaning he was probably worse than we were. Well, maybe there is one tormentor of cats in your group of friends. You don't know it. You don't know if Otto is joking or not when he told you he set a cat on fire when he was little, nearly made you give him up as a friend. He said he was little, and you never saw him commit such an act. Oh, I got a message. Who's that from? Oh, it's from my friends. I'm going to go visit them tomorrow. Anyway, back to the book. Perhaps he instantly regretted what he had done. Perhaps he had changed. Does change remove the catalyst or just place it in another location? Right before Semi-Famous' second hiatus, Otto will set up a show for the band in Chicago at a new club that he will promise is all ages. While on the road, Franklin finds out the band is booked for a 21 and older show. Otto is fucking lying to us, JJ. Well, maybe the information is wrong. We should call him. We're not playing an all-ages show in our own... We're not playing an all-ages show in our own fucking town. 75% of our audience won't be able to get in the club. It could be the last show ever. He's lying to us. I don't fucking trust him. Let me call him right now. The two of you walk over to a gas station payphone in the middle of some heat-blazing fucking southern state. You call Otto. You ask him if the show is all ages. He hesitates, then confirms that it's definitely all ages. He says it's all ages. You hang up the phone. Franklin picks it up, takes a few quarters out of his pocket, and deposits them into the phone. He looks in his notebook for a number and then dials. Yes, my name is Henry Schmerler of Henry Schmerler & Sons Used Cars and Refrigerators. My youngest boy, Schmedley Schmerler, is only 17 and wants to know if he can go to that goddamn punk show you're having next week. Yes, with what's-their-faces. Over 21? You are sure that's not a mistake? No way in hell, huh? Well, thanks. If you're ever looking for a good deal, you know where to go. That part isn't true. That didn't really happen, but we actually had friends back home call. Like a bunch of different people call and find out that it was over 21. But I thought it was funny to give Ben that sort of... Because he would do stupid, funny things like that, imitating voices. So Mr. Famous, he hangs the phone up and doesn't say a word. He walks away back to the van. That show never happens. Mr. Famous never talks to Otto again. Otto has been your friend since high school. You lived with him for many years. He was there for you when your father died. He didn't try to say anything stupid. He just sat close by at the wake and smiled with tears in his eyes. You still talk with him on a regular basis. He is still a good friend, but it's never been the same. Actually, a few years ago, Matt Nelson passed away, so he's gone now. The topic of him booking shows for the band is forever ignored, and you now question every statement of fact he makes encompassing any topic. You would like to give him the benefit of the doubt, or just forget about the whole thing, but it's hard to tell what is the truth with Otto. I guess the longer you know someone, the more willing you are to accept their flaws. This is what you may be thinking to yourself as you watch Franklin head back to the van, open the front door, and disappear into the driver's seat. Perhaps Otto did light a cat on fire. Lou doesn't return to his house. He wanders through his lawn, picking up garbage. Mickle, Marianne, and Skunk are talking quietly by the car, poking each other, giving each other harsh tickles, and giggling like schoolchildren in the back of a classroom. Are they here yet? Amber's eyes brighten. Sometimes when she is very excited, she begins to look like a tall, dark, lop-eared rabbit with buck teeth. Sure they are. You are a little put off by Amber's excitement. She seems too interested in the arrival of Swindle Parlor. People tell you that she is a slut, that she'll sleep with anybody. Sounds kind of harsh. You don't know this to be true, and you aren't so sure that having a lot of sex is so indecent and wrong, even if it were true. And yet, her enthusiasm makes you nervous. It is always best to avoid melodrama. Earlier last year, Marianne and Amber traveled to California with you and Franklin. They were up for the trip, and the two of you needed more people to drive and pay for gas. So why not? Amber may have become good friends with Swindle Parlor while staying at the tar pit. You don't recall. It's possible. You just don't want trouble or any uncomfortable situations taking place in your mother's house, especially with Lou hovering around with the power of killing cats in mysterious ways. Eggert is out looking for coffee, and Errol is inside chatting with Mr. Famous. Their conversation sounds rather exclusive, but I'm sure they won't mind a short interruption, stressing the word short. How are you? She says to me. Fine, just getting ready to go to work. You show her the juggling balls. You call that work? No, this is preparation. I soon have to go sell merchandise to customers for the profit of my boss and make a little cash in the process. Just go on in. She walks into the house. You watch her as she moves to the door. Her combat boots give her a heavy step for her tall physique. She has a masculinity that is skewed and magnified within her obvious femininity. A deep voice, a slug to the chest that sends small men spiraling 6 to 10 feet depending on her mood, a leather jacket, chains hanging from her hip, black tights, a cut-off white swindle parlor concert shirt, and a jet-black puff of hair covering one eye, causing her head to tilt slightly to the left. She has a strong sex appeal. You like her very much. She is brittle and tough. She gives the first impression of someone who has been trained to act stupid, or feels the need to disguise her intelligence for fear of emotions overriding. But she has smarts. You know she does. You hope she gets what she wants out of life. I should probably turn this down in case that starts beeping again. During the 2 weeks submerged in the lifestyle of Swindle Parlor, you and Franklin continuously make wisecracks about Amber traveling close to Errol like a little bunny, hopping beside him with his chat book in her hand. The day after their arrival, the entire punk rock congregation wanders through the local indoor shopping mall where you work. Errol and Amber head toward a department store tucked in the corner. Right before she disappears with Errol behind a row of scantily dressed mannequins, she turns around and winks to Marianne. Marianne shrugs, quickly takes Mickle and Skunk by the hands, and runs into the food court to get some fries. Maybe she'll buy him some fucking clean clothes. Franklin doesn't want to be in the mall on his afternoon off. He'd rather be sleeping or working on some songs, but while entertaining, the host has to engage in some activities that are not joyous. He does gain some pleasure by imagining that Amber will make Errol accept new clothes as a gift. Errol smells pretty rank and hasn't changed his clothes in months. Franklin has inherited idiosyncratic behavior from his mother that makes dealing with the aspect of California punks very difficult. Who can blame him? He can play the social punk pretty well, entertaining the masses while living out of a suitcase, but his heart is firmly planted in a white, sterile, clean house in the suburbs, with simple furnishings, neatly organized and never touched, and spotless walls and carpets, with beautiful fragrances wafting through the hallways of framed Ramones posters and potpourri. That's a very true thing about Ben. I always wondered, actually I haven't wondered till I read this, I didn't know I was so specific about it, but I wonder if he minded me talking about that. I told him I was going to be as honest as possible with this book, and he said it would do pretty well. I think he was kind of shocked by how much honesty I had in the book, though. And then I say, I don't think Errol likes clean clothes, Mr. Famous. I don't think he wants anything to do with them. This knowledge is not such an intelligent observation as it is a statement of experience. No one who lives in the tar pit seems too concerned with changing clothes. That doesn't mean they are not obsessed with style. They just prefer to be slightly uncomfortable in their skin, giving them a persistent pang, reminding them that they just don't belong anywhere. And perhaps you also have a sense of the near future, which is quite possible since you are never quite sure where your feet are planted. In your head is the future memory, vague, of Amber not buying him clothes, and Franklin giving him an ultimatum. Washing machine and shower the dirt away, or your ass is on the highway. Errol begrudgingly agrees to a full washing of his attire. Well, it'll be an adventure for me. You take him into the laundry area adjacent to the bedroom in the basement. He peels off his clothes. Mr. Famous has given him a pair of shorts and an undershirt to wear while his clothes are detoxifying. The one fear in the process is that the strands of material of his worn thin pants and shirt, only held together by the putty-like elixir created from sweat reacting with the multitudes of diverse dirt and scum collected along the miles of his unbathed path, may not make it through the wash and dry cycles in one piece. You show him how to pour the liquid detergent into the washer. This reminds you of the time your mother taught you how to draw a star with a crayon. You're overwhelmed with a mixture of amazement of the star's simple beauty and weary of your own ability to create it. The clothes are left alone in the washer for 22 minutes. Now, what happens within this washer during these 22 codependent minutes must involve some kind of divine intervention by some grunge punk angel. The outcome will soon be made apparent. But when you return to remove the clothes, you never notice that something has gone amiss. Perhaps you are whisked away from reality by your sudden unabashed pedantry. Errol listens and watches as you display how to remove items from the washer, the items having appeared to hold together just fine, and put them into the dryer. You guide his eyes toward the little dial and demonstrate how to turn the dial so that the arrow points to the hot position for 30 minutes. When the 30 minutes elapse and you and Errol pull the clothes out of the dryer, it is obvious that something has definitely gone wrong. The putty-like substance has not vanished from the surface of his clothes. It has spread deeper and wider into the mutating material. Also, there are brand new crustifying spots of coagulated detergent. The washer never added water into its machination equation. Or perhaps someone never turned it on. The dryer, as co-conspirator, has adequately baked his shirt and pants, stiff and dry as toothpicks and spots, and moist and sticky in others. It is quite possible that they are even more odoriferous, smelling like burnt detergent and dried-out sweat. You offer to start the whole wash cycle over, but Errol takes the clothes away from you and says, "No, that's fine. I kind of like 'em this way." Eggert probably smelled just as bad, but he had this strange, subtle power of distraction or illusion. He diverted people's attention by not acknowledging the subject is questioned, including stench and appearance. For instance, his lack of footwear. Eggert came back late that first night in town with grass stains and small minor cuts on the tops of his feet and a cup of McDonald's coffee in his hands. The rest of the gang was in the living room, listening to Franklin and Errol rattle on and on about their views on punk rock attire. So it's a prerequisite for all California punks to say hella this and rad that, and to refuse to change their clothes based on the pretext of a water shortage conspiracy started by some environmental theorist in the 70s. That might be true, Franklin, but it fails in comparison to the animal rights activists and vegetarians in the Midwest wearing their leather jackets and suede shoes. It could be fucking 120 degrees, and you Midwest punks refuse to take off your leathers. You're frying your brains. Eggert peeks through the screen of your front door. "Hey, where the hell have you been?" "I found coffee, JJ." "Well, you can finish that shit on the stoop." McDonald's was not going to be tolerated. This visitor from the California-based Tarpit deserved better than coffee made from prepackaged grounds. During the shopping mall excursion the next day, the two of you stopped in at the coffee shop and picked out some good, strong French roast coffee, made for enticing by the generous employee discount. He was all smiles walking around barefoot in that mall with his grocery bag of finely ground beans. Security guards kept their eyes on this group of punks as it traveled from shop to shop. They talked to each other over their fancy walkie-talkies from one side of the mall to the other, from atop the escalator to the balcony of the food court, down to the janitorial closet in the basement. They were just waiting for one of these punks to slip up. You have no idea what this slip would entail. There was no one in the group that had any instinct to steal or search for a brawl like Illinois mall rats have been known to do. The guards could not get anyone for vagrancy because at least every other punk had bought something. The one small detail, the one ignored detail that boggled your mind, the one detail that to you was so obviously a breaking of the rules, was the bare feet of the 6-foot-tall Eggert. Yet no one, not a single person except yourself, even flinched at his dirty, tattooed, exposed toes. No shirt, no shoes, no service. It was a non-negotiable shopping mall law. How in the hell did he walk about with a single security gaze scanning below his ankles? It was wonderful. It was irrational. The power of mind over matter. It was a rebellion that you could accept, free from the need of shock value or conflict. He was not wandering barefoot to get reactions, like perhaps wearing large clanking chains or hole-puncturing, bloody nose-punching metal studs or swishing 16-foot-high mohawks would. He just preferred not to wear shoes, and the world crossed his path oblivious to his successful rebellion. Later that night, you attempted the ultimate test. You took a small group out to eat at Red Lobster, a middle-class restaurant that was upper-class enough for someone who didn't have much money to spend. Eggert, you, and Franklin ate a wonderful dinner and a pleasant chocolate pudding dessert. And not once did the waiter or the customers or the doorman even look below the ankles of the shoeless Eggert. the trans-mundane guitarist and gnarly singer for Swindle Parlor. The audacity of this commonplace act still amazes you to this very day, even now as you stand next to this shoeless, drenched man in the Boston rain. Did he just wink at you? Maybe for a moment the face of Eggert was superimposed on this shoeless man, a trace of memory attaching itself to the present, as if an omniscient, omnipotent, infinite small child with plastic scissors and a tub of Elmer's paste was playing cutout with your life. You feel something in your hand. You look down to notice that you are holding an extension cord with exposed wire. What? That's the end of Chapter 8, Book 1. That was a lot of fun. My experiences with Crimpshrine could almost be in a book in itself, but I have other things to tackle. But there's more about them in the book, but those were some of the most fun chapters to write, is about hanging out with Jeff and Aaron from Crimpshrine.
just going home. Is it the way I look or just as I'm